I think in terms of the question as a whole, what we're really hesitant to do in the CAG project is talk too much about money from the point of view of wealth. We don't really want to kind of promote those kind of values of it's all about the money, and that's the reason why you're doing it. But also not being naive enough to think that actually that's not a really important factor for people. But it's about couching it in different language. Why are people throwing stuff away? Is it because they don't have time? They don't have the information? I mean, that stuff about the carrot is absolutely great. And things, salad, buying washed salad, it's going to go off so much quicker than salad that you wash at home. But how are you going to know that unless someone tells you? You're not going to find that out where you buy the salad. But also, so thinking about, what is it actually that's going to appeal to this person? Is it about where they can get more information, or is it about where they can get different food and things like that? But I think that personal message is really key. So when we send out information or messages, really important to put your own motivations into it. Like when you're engaging with someone, say, well, this is why I do it. It's important for me for these reasons, and make it really personal, because you're talking to another human being, and you don't want it to come across as though you're doing something wrong. This is all your fault, and not focusing too much on the role of the individual. You want to empower people. You want to say you could do these things, and this is going to have a really big impact. And this stat I heard earlier about how many cars off the road the equivalent would be, and that's huge, and that does speak to people. But they want to know that it's not all their responsibility. They're not being told off for doing things, and just talking about it and finding that common ground, because that's the great thing about food. Possibly makes it a bit easier than other waste streams like clothes and furniture and electronics and things like that, because we all eat, we all buy food, we all cook with it. Some of us with different degrees of confidence than others. But I think fundamentally, what are the most important messages? It's actually thinking about how you're framing that message, who you are, who you're talking to, and how actually you're going to get that dialogue going that isn't just going to be forgotten as soon as that person walks away from you, but it's actually going to resonate, and they'll think about it a bit more.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. That's really interesting points that you've raised there. Karen, do you agree with Peter? What's your experience of the most effective messages to communicate to people about to help them reduce their waste?
Peter is absolutely right. We are a complicated bunch of people. We're all different. We all have different values, life experiences. We shop differently to each other and live differently as well. So it is definitely not the case of one size fits all with the messaging. And even when you think about cultural differences, that changes as well. I was at a conference a couple of years ago where a team in, I think it was Greater Manchester, had said to connect with different cultures in their area. They needed to really go through the actual leaders of the community, because whatever the leader of the community said, then other people would be inspired by that. And that's generally how the rubbish diet works and how we communicate. I know that as I bill myself as a housewife. That's how I came to this. It was a housewife's challenge, even though I now do this pretty much 24/7, and it is a full-time job in a sense. But I know that the messages that I put out as a woman in the 40s is not necessarily going to appeal to younger people. So what we try and do is focus very much on who is delivering that message. And I think from a communications perspective, we need to find those inspirational people who can actually deliver that message to their set of peers. And whether that's somebody who's young, at a university, a student, who actually has got influence with their community. That street I mentioned in Shrewsbury, we've got a fantastic cheerleader there, Howard Hutchings. He's a member of the local church groups, and he has gone out to the church groups and has actually delivered the rubbish diet according to the messages of God and the religion. So it's brilliant because he's been able to contextualise the benefits of the rubbish diet for that particular community. And we're seeing that pick up pace around the country as well. So I think it really is down to who is delivering that message. And from a communications perspective, this used to really be in the hands of the local authorities. And we are seeing so much change to that over the last few years. We're seeing supermarkets now getting totally on the message with how they communicate to their shoppers. So we're seeing communications change from being local authority to residents to supermarkets and consumers. And it seems that that consumer messaging, even though we are the same people at the end of the day, seems to be actually taking hold much faster. Maybe it's because supermarkets, being in retail, seem to have the glitz, whereas local authorities don't necessarily. But we're finding that partnerships are now actually taking place. But coming back to the individual, I spend a lot of time having conversations with people, finding out what really makes them tick as to what is going to encourage them to recycle more, as well, recycle better, waste less. And working with one particular lady on Hugh's programme, whilst doing the research on the ground, I tried pulling all of the waste reduction ideas out of the bag to try and actually make her tick. What actually ignited the spark was when I said to her, of course, by recycling more, what you're doing is you're actually putting more into the economy. It's good for the economy, which means it's good for jobs. And as soon as I mentioned jobs and the economy, she suddenly got very animated and quite excited about doing it. So it's pulling out all those different messages that might not necessarily be the first thing that people think about when it comes to what goes in their bin.
Absolutely, that's a really interesting point that you raised there, Karen. I think that working in waste communications myself, particularly when I work with people who are perhaps a little bit newer to the subject, a lot of the time people think that communications is just about broadcasting a message, but I always say it's about 80% listening, because it's only when you actually listen to the people that you want to communicate to, you can find their agenda, what makes them tick, and then you can present the subject in a way that they're going to be able to relate to. Because as you say, one size certainly doesn't fit all when it comes to communicating about people's own behaviour in their own homes in particular.
That's right.
So that's really interesting. Go on, sorry, after you.
Small steps as well, thinking about what will actually stick with people, because let's face it, waste reduction, when you've got a huge wheelie bin of rubbish that looks insurmountable if you're new to this, and I've been through this, it took me 8 weeks to really crack it, but it's the small steps. And if it starts with looking at people's habits and asking them what's the one thing that they think they could change, they hold on to that one thing. And that might be, for example, measuring food. Now, I'm going to come to my props again, where, thinking about food waste, actually making sure that you cook just what you need is important. And if people overcook, which is a simple message, you can point them in the direction of tools which can actually help. Now, you don't need to buy anything. This happens to be a rice measurer. This happens to be a spaghetti measurer. One's a freebie, the other's one I found at a shop. But you can use your own utensils around the house. For example, I know that this cup, which I didn't have to buy, actually fits enough rice to feed me and my husband, and no more without any leftovers. So it's giving out facts like that that people can actually relate to and keep in their mind. We hardly have any leftover spaghetti anymore, thanks to that measurer. Sometimes because of the kids, I get it wrong with this because of their appetites. But it's actually coming back to those simple steps. And, one of the things that we're trying to do on food waste, thinking about tools, is getting people to focus on actually the measurement, measurement of what you're actually cooking, but measurement of what you're throwing away. And, one of the things, because I don't live in a food waste collection area, one of the things that I started doing, sorry, a small bin, is actually measuring the amount of food that we were throwing away. Because if it goes into the general bin, you can't possibly keep an eye on it. It just disappears, so the fairies can actually take it away. But if you're actually putting in your food waste into a separate little bin, and you know how many small loads of that you throw away within a week, you can actually feel very motivated when it starts to come down. And that motivation when you're measuring is what keeps you going, because you just want to beat your own expectations.
Yeah, that's a great tip, that one. Yeah, to setting people or helping themselves to set goals for themselves, and then they feel that sense of achievement once they do reach the goal and that sort of thing. Yeah, motivating householders is a very important step, isn't it? I know that sort of so informing people, motivating them, reminding them as well. With longer term campaigns. So it's a pity that the campaigns that you're running in Oxfordshire, they're quite long term, aren't they? That you're running with your residents there. Can you talk to us about perhaps the different stages in the campaigns? So when you first reach out to people, right through to getting them to to keep a particular behaviour up for a longer term.
Yeah, that's the benefit of doing things from a community level, is that you get people on all stages of that journey. You're not just dipping in and out. So I guess the first point of call is if you're forming a community group or running a community project, it's just making contact with people on that thing you've got in common, which is usually a geographic community, same street, same village, same town, same city, whatever, and engaging people that way. And starting to talk about these things, in a really positive way, and all of the things Karen mentioned, which can be really positive about getting more skills and more knowledge and more information. And some of the things our groups do are around information events, which is maybe a film or a speaker or a practical demonstration, and some of them are getting people involved. Come along and cook, learn some knife skills, for chopping veg, things like that. Some of them are visits to like an anaerobic digestion facility to see where the food waste ends up in, if you've got food recycling. And all of these different types of events, making them available to everybody and accessible to everybody, which is not always easy, so that people can pick and choose their own engagement levels and their own interest. And get involved. And it's at that level, they're not really campaigns. They don't really have a beginning and an end. They don't have funding. They don't have targets. They're just a bunch of people in a community who are passionate about a thing and are just getting that message out there. And everything they do that's positive, that's social, that's inclusive, includes those messages. And it just kind of slowly gets into people's heads. And sometimes it becomes, even unconscious. I think about when I started doing this, what people's response to curbside recycling was, and how different that is now. A decade later or so, it's vast, but you don't see it happening. It's like your hair growing; you don't notice it, and constantly getting these messages out there from trusted community leaders, or just your neighbour or your friends and family. Normalizing it is really, really important. Doesn't make it's not a massive issue. It's not really weighty. It's not your fault and you're going to destroy the planet if you get it wrong. It's just normal. It's what people do, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
That's great. It's a very sort of gentle way into people's sort of psyche, isn't it, and into their behaviour. We've had a question come through via Twitter for you, Peter, and the question is: what kind of reception does Community Action Group have for your events from the community? So, which events are people most receptive to? Is it the films? Is it the cooking lessons?
Yeah, good question. And from a waste point of view, swap shops are always really good. So if you've never been to a swap shop, what that is usually in a big space like a community hall, something like that, and people bring items, clothes, small bits of furniture, toys, games, books that they don't want anymore, and leave them with all the stuff, and then take things they do want. It's a really, really simple idea. Some communities just do it outside their homes. They leave things outside and people collect things and take them away. But it's really, really lovely, because it's one of the things with waste we struggle with is this idea of, if you're anti-waste, you're anti-consumption, shopping, and things like that, which quite often you might be, but it's a really difficult message to sell, telling people to buy less and telling people not to consume, and that's going to turn a lot of people off. But if you you don't want to criticize that message. It's not about, it's like, don't criticize it, replace it, make it obsolete. So this idea of shopping is giving an alternative. You're still getting that social aspect of getting new items, that excitement of, yeah, I can take this thing home and it's all for free. And again, like with food, that attracts absolutely everyone, and they're really good to do after Christmas as well. Everyone's trying to get rid of the things they didn't really want and sort of hide them away. So I think those are the ones that have the most impact. But similarly, on a smaller scale, things about skills and just giving people skills and confidence. We've talked a little bit about community cooking, but also electrical repair, bike repair, simple sewing techniques, so you can fix that jumper rather than having to throw it away and get a new one, and just empowering people to be able to do that themselves and feel confident about it. I think a lot of the issue comes from people just don't know, and it's really difficult to admit when you don't know something when you think that you should, and so things going on in the bin is really anonymous, and that can be quite comforting to some people. But actually just trying to get skills out there in a really free, open and friendly way, not telling people they should know how to do something, but just saying, we're doing this thing, if you want to get involved, come along. And we find that's where people come back, and you see, and then they want to give the skills to someone else, whether through a formal training session or whether just to their friends and family. And those skills are great because they just go through the community. They trickle down from one person to the next person, and it's a really inspiring thing to see.
Yeah, that's great. And because people do feel pride when they've gained new skills, particularly when they're like, a lot of these skills our grandparents had, and we seem to have lost them over the last couple of generations. So it's great seeing all of these repair cafes and so on springing up all over the place, really, to re-skill people so they know how to look after the things that they've bought. Just going back to food waste briefly, Karen, we've had a question come in via Twitter for you. The question is this: I got married recently. We feel all we're doing daily, other than work, is cooking and cleaning utensils. Karen's asking us to cook what's enough. Does that mean cooking daily? Over to you.
Oh,
We've got 5 minutes to go. So if you could answer it briefly, please, that would be great.
Yes, I will. I have a love-hate relationship with cooking. I love cooking when I've got time for it. I absolutely hate it when I haven't. And what I find is that, if you can actually batch cook, so cook up several different portions at the same time, then that is great, because it doesn't mean that you have to spend all day at the stove. And just put those in, the portions in your fridge or your freezer for another day. My husband was great the other night. He was cooking a meal, but also realised that we needed some salmon that needed cooking up. So cook that salmon exactly at that same time and just put it in a Tupperware dish in the fridge, and that was lunch for the next day. So you can balance it with your priorities. But I would say if you're short for time, cook as much as you can and store it in the freezer or fridge, and then use it the next day or later in the week.
Sure, yeah, freezer is definitely your best friend if you're trying to cut down on food waste, isn't it? Okay, that's great, thank you. Okay, so we've got 4 minutes left of this fantastic discussion. So the last question I'm going to put to both of you: could you please share your top tips, just 1 or 2 would be great, for reducing waste in the household? So, Peter, let's go with you first, please.
Okay, top tips. Wow, yes. So I think simple repairs is a really important thing, and just looking at clothing and furniture and electrical items and things like that, and just It's more of a slight change of mindset of just thinking about things in terms of how do you fix this, and not I have to do it myself. But with sewing as a good example, a year ago I'd never used a thread and needle, but through the idea of actually, if I fix my socks, if I fix this, that, and the other, sew buttons onto things, they're going to last longer, and it's a lot cheaper for me. And that comes from talking to other people, getting those skills from other people and talking about it. So I think, a practical example, fixing your clothes, but a more general example is talk to other people about how they do it and learn little skills from them.
That's really good advice, Peter. Thank you. Super. And Karen, finally from you?
I'd say, quite as you'd expect, treat it like a diet. Set yourself a goal and a target, and actually look at how much you are reducing over those weeks. And once you've got that framework, look at exactly what you can recycle in your area, because it's often surprising that you don't know exactly what you can. But focus on that food waste by making sure that you stick to a list. If you can, plan ahead and only buy what you need. And then when you bring it home, store it correctly. Looking at top tips such as keeping your fridge at 5 degrees really helps, 5 degrees or less. And also making sure that if you've got something that is used by its use-by date and you've not got chance, put it in the freezer. I could go on, but if I could give a great plug for the rubbish diet, this is a diet plan for your bin, and www.therubishdiet.org.uk is a really great place to start for that motivation.
Thank you so much, both of you. Yes, I would recommend to everybody checking out the Rubbish Diet. If you've got questions specifically for Karen or for Peter, they're both on Twitter. So if you go to the Be Wastewise Twitter page, you'll see that we've been tweeting with Karen and Peter for the last few hours. So you'll be able to get in touch with them. And we will be posting links and more information about the topics that we've discussed today on the Be Wastewise website alongside this discussion. So all that's left for me to do is to give my enormous thanks to our participants, Karen Cannard and Peter Lefort. Thank you both very much for sharing your tips and advice and experiences with all of the academics and practitioners and anybody else who's going to be watching the discussion, and look forward to speaking with you both at some point in the future. So thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.